7 days before the Marines landed on Peleliu, Admiral Halsey recommended canceling the entire operation. The Joint Chiefs overruled him. What planners forecast as a 4-day fight became 73 days of cave warfare that killed more than 1,500 Americans. After the war, several commanders who approved it acknowledged the battle may have been pointless. The chain of decisions that sent those men ashore began with a single directive. On August 23, 1944, General Douglas MacArthur's headquarters issued War Planning Directive 344. The order specified that the capture of Peleliu and its airfield had to be completed before any advance toward the Philippines. The directive's language was clear: leaving the airstrip in Japanese hands would allow enemy aircraft to strike at the right flank of the Leyte invasion force. Official maps from the Pacific Fleet Intelligence Section placed Peleliu 450 nautical miles east of the Philippines, a position that on paper threatened the sea lanes for the coming landings. The Joint Chiefs of Staff reinforced this assessment in a memorandum dated August 15th. Their warning said that the airfield, if left operational, could launch sorties against Allied convoys moving toward Leyte Gulf. Intelligence summaries estimated that Japanese fighters and bombers, though limited in number, could mount interdiction attacks on supply lines at a critical phase of the campaign. MacArthur's staff linked the timing of the Palau operation directly to his timetable for the Philippine return. The argument was not only about geography, but about momentum. Any delay, they argued, would give the Japanese time to regroup and reinforce. The planning documents described Peleliu as a necessary stepping stone, one that would secure a forward base, deny the enemy a launch point, and guarantee the advance continued without pause. In the logic of the moment, the airfield's potential threat was treated as justification enough to proceed. This rationale, codified in War Planning Directive 344, became the backbone of the operation. The invasion was not framed as optional, but as a prerequisite for the main event: MacArthur's return to the Philippines. The planners' confidence in this necessity would soon face its first test. On September 7, 1944, Admiral William F. Halsey, Jr. submitted a memorandum that broke with the prevailing optimism among Pacific commanders. His assessment was blunt: the risks to our men outweigh the modest gain of neutralizing an airstrip that can be suppressed by carrier-based air power. Halsey's staff, acting on these concerns, held back Task Force 58 from preemptive strikes and began reassigning landing craft to support the Leyte operation. The intelligence available to Halsey painted a picture of a Japanese airfield already battered by carrier raids, with only a handful of operational planes remaining. Carrier after-action reports confirmed the limited threat, and signals intelligence suggested no substantial reinforcement was underway. Yet within days, the machinery of Joint Command pushed forward. General MacArthur's headquarters pressed for momentum, warning that any pause would allow the enemy to regroup and threaten the Philippines campaign. Admiral Ernest King, the Chief of Naval Operations, argued that the logistics pipeline was already in motion, and that aborting the mission would waste months of preparation and undermine the credibility of joint planning. By September 11th, the 1st Marine Division and supporting units were embarked and en route. The Joint Chiefs of Staff convened on September 13th. Their decision, recorded as Action Item Number 12, denied Halsey's request. The rationale was institutional. The operation was too far along to cancel without risking broader strategic delays. On September 14th, Admiral Leahy signed the final order to proceed. The voices of caution were formally set aside, and the fate of thousands was sealed not by enemy action, but by a decision chain that favored continuity over reconsideration. Major General William Rupertus addressed his staff in early 1944 with a prediction: Peleliu would fall in 4 days. The island, measuring just 6 miles long and 2 miles wide, appeared manageable to the planners assembled for Operation Stalemate 2. The official briefings, recorded in the division's war diary, set a timetable that assumed swift progress. The plan was to secure the airfield, neutralize resistance at the southern tip, and prepare for follow-on operations. Maps produced by the Pacific Fleet's Intelligence Section supported this optimism, showing limited concrete bunkers and only a handful of cave entrances identified by aerial reconnaissance. The coral ridges, though noted in terrain appraisals, were downplayed in the final planning slides. The 4-day estimate rested on 3 core assumptions. First, that the pre-invasion naval and air bombardment would suppress all defensive fire. Second, that Japanese forces would contest the beaches with a small number of pillboxes, as seen in earlier Central Pacific battles. Third, that the coral terrain could be traversed quickly after brief engineering work. Amphibious planners cataloged 18 coastal gun positions, 3 airstrip revetments, and a few visible caves as the primary obstacles. Underwater demolition teams reported a generally smooth reef, with only minor ridges and boulders requiring last-minute clearance. The division's operational order reflected this confidence. The airfield and the point were to be in Marine hands within 96 hours. The initial landing force was sized accordingly, with logistics and ammunition calculated for a short, intense campaign. The planners' optimism codified in the stalemate. 2 briefings would soon be measured against realities they had not fully imagined: the depth of the Japanese cave network, the resilience of the defenders, and the limits of their own intelligence. Japanese engineers arrived on Peleliu in early 1944 with explicit orders: make the island impregnable. Over the next 4 months, they carved more than 500 caves and tunnels into the Umur-Brogol ridges, reinforcing limestone with concrete and camouflaging entrances beneath tangled brush. The resulting network stretched across 1.2 square kilometers, with each chamber linked by narrow passages and designed to withstand direct hits. General Sade Inoue's garrison could shift machine guns, mortars, and even small artillery from one firing port to another, vanishing underground between bombardments. The American fire plan, by contrast, relied on surface destruction. Battleships and cruisers delivered over 13,000 high-explosive shells in the hours before the landing, with less than a quarter of the total consisting of armor-piercing rounds. Spotter aircraft reported at 800 hours that all primary targets were neutralized, yet the majority of shells detonated harmlessly above the cave mouths or shattered against the coral, leaving the underground system untouched. The post-bombardment damage report found that more than 90% of the Japanese cave network remained operational as the first wave approached. A naval gunfire spotter later wrote that it looked like we had plowed the island under, but when the smoke cleared, the ridges were still bristling. They had simply gone underground. The mismatch between ordnance and defense was not a matter of oversight, but of doctrine. The planners expected pillboxes and surface bunkers, not an engineered honeycomb. As the landing craft drew closer, the illusion of a silenced island dissolved. The Japanese, shielded in their caves, waited for the moment to open fire. The 4-day forecast had not accounted for a defense built to outlast even the heaviest bombardment. By dusk on September 15th, the cost of the landing was already measured in numbers that defied the planners' forecasts. The 1st Marine Division reported 1,100 casualties in a single day, killed, wounded, or missing, nearly 1/5 of its combat strength. Colonel Louis Chesty Puller's 1st Marine Regiment absorbed the shock on the left flank. His unit's daily report recorded a 56% casualty rate, forcing more than half his men out of action before nightfall. Amphibious tractors, counted as essential for crossing the reef, were left burning and half submerged along the shoreline. The after-action log described the withdrawal of shattered battalions, with stretcher teams working through the night. The official estimate of a rapid advance gave way in hours to the reality of a beach choked with the wounded and the dead. The rupture between planning and outcome was no longer theoretical. It was written into the division's casualty ledger before the second wave had even reached the inland ridges. 73 days passed before the fighting on Peleliu ended. The 4-day timetable, once stated as a certainty in planning documents, dissolved into a campaign measured by attrition and exhaustion. Final casualty reports recorded 1,544 Americans killed and 8,010 wounded, numbers that left the 1st Marine Division depleted for months. Japanese resistance did not collapse, but it was erased almost to the last man. Out of an estimated 10,900 defenders, 10,695 were listed as dead. The island's coral ridges, honeycombed with caves, absorbed wave after wave of attack, turning every advance into a ledger entry of the wounded and the lost. Post-war assessments by Marine and Army staff returned to the same arithmetic: the cost in lives, the months spent refitting shattered units, and the airfield's limited use after capture. The campaign ledger closed with a total that left the original rationale in doubt and the question of necessity unresolved. Today, the island stands as a quiet verdict on decisions made far from its shores. Strategic plans promised swift victory, but reality delivered attrition and loss. The question persists: when cost outweighs gain, who decides what is necessary? For those who endured Peleliu, that answer never came.